Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Desert Island 2. I'm Conrad, and with me is Will, as usual.
Hello.
And our guest today is Steve from Radio Free Skaro.
Hello there.
Now, obviously most of our listeners will probably be aware of Radio Free Skaro, but just in case there's anyone who isn't, before we get into the list, so do you mind telling the listeners about sort of how you got into that and how that got started? A bit about that?
It was a while ago. It was me and my friend Warren. We're at work. We worked at a TV station watching cartoons at 3 a.m. Yeah, I know, dream job, right? And we got bored and started talking about Doctor Who. We realized we really liked Doctor Who, both of us, and he suggested me later on down the line, we should do a podcast about it, and I had no idea what a podcast was, and so he told me, and I said, okay, that sounds interesting, and so we just started yammering about Doctor Who for half an hour every week, almost 8 years ago now, and here we are today. So it's been a wild ride.
So, have you got any particular favourite memories from doing the podcast? You must have 8 years worth.
Yeah, I know. Most of them are a blur. Going to the conventions is great. We go to Gallifrey 1 in Los Angeles in February every year, and we do a live show on stage, and we do interviews and everything else, and it's just a lot of fun. And that just seems to be the focal point for our year, it seems. So those are a lot of good memories there.
Right, so we'll get into your list now, but
the interesting thing about your list is that all of your choices are new series episodes.
Yes.
I think that would be quite controversial amongst a lot of the fans.
What's that, sorry?
I think it might be controversial amongst some fans, because
I know.
obviously who is the superior one. Is there any reason, a particular reason why you've chose no new classics, or is it just happened to come out that way?
Honestly, I watched this show for almost 30 years now, so I was born on classic Who, and sometimes when fans like me sort of look back and say, "Oh, what's your favorite episodes?" We naturally gravitate towards the ones that we liked as a kid. And I thought, this time, no, I'm actually going to exclude those because I haven't been giving the new series its proper kudos, if you will, in relation to. So I've just chosen eight new series episodes because, let's face it, I've seen those classic Who episodes countless times. So I think if I'm stuck on a desert island, I could afford to watch 8 newer ones and get myself sick of those in a longer amount of time.
Your first choice is what some would say a classic of the new series. It's a Christopher Eccleston story, and it is Dalek.
Rid the universe of your filth. Why don't you just die? You would make a good Dalek.
Yes. I think that one is probably the most important episode of Doctor Who. Certainly since it came back, and maybe even in the last 30 years, because up until that point, the Daleks were like in Kit Kat commercials, and they were just sort of seen as a joke. They couldn't climb upstairs. You could sort of just, shoot their eye stalk off and nothing but, run away from them. And that episode pretty much cut down all the tropes that had sort of been growing up around the Daleks over the years and knocked them down one by one and turned this one Dalek into a supreme killing machine. And I think what it was that really made it is how Chris Eccleston's Doctor reacted to his first meeting with the Dalek. He wasn't like, "Oh, so we meet again." It was like a him meeting a war criminal, and just the passion that Eccleston exuded in that scene, I think, just made the Daleks all that more real as well. That's why I just love it. I think it just set the Daleks up again as the enemy in Doctor Who.
Yeah, this is one of my personal favourite ones. In fact, it might have been the first one I saw.
Oh, really?
I can't think of any before that I definitely saw all of. This is the first one I remember I definitely watched all of it. And because the good thing about this one is it's sort of a isolated small base, so there's no way out. So it's sort of for the cast, the guest cast, and the obviously the Doctor and Rose. It's not as easy as just it's sort of just you could just go away in the TARDIS. Mm-hmm. And it's also sort of plays out how big a threat even one Dalek is, rather than just having an army.
Yeah.
In many regards, it almost kind of ruined the Daleks afterwards because then if one Dalek could do that, how do you defeat an army of them? And it's sort of come up with more outlandish excuses over the years to try and get rid of Daleks. And I don't think it's quite worked as well as it did in that first Dalek episode in 2000.
Yeah. It was a very effective episode, and it did redefine them as the big bad, the main enemy of the Doctor.
Yeah, and the one thing that they did in that episode, and they haven't done since, which is tragic, is in that I don't know if you guys remember, but the one scene where it's sort of shot from above, and the middle portion of the Dalek is swinging around to shoot soldiers behind him and back. I remember seeing that scene, and I thought, oh, we have reached a golden age. I literally believed that.
I don't think I've ever had that again, have they? They've just turned.
No, they spin it around once in Parting of the Ways, I think, when they're flying through space. He's not shooting anyone or anything like that. But that's it. That is the last time. It only happened in Series 1. I found that very odd.
Yeah, it is weird.
It's also, this is sort of where we find out a bit more about Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, because sort of people think, when you look back, sort of think, oh, we know everything about the Doctor now, but when new viewers are coming to it with a new series, the Doctor was quite mysterious. There was the talk of a war, but you didn't really know anything about it, whereas you actually hear about how his race was destroyed in this one. Mm-hmm. It was through the Dalek.
Yeah, and I like how they were very coy about the history of the show in that first season, possibly because they didn't want to overload too many people with all that continuity, which is the best choice.
Yeah, because otherwise you sound like the TV movie.
Exactly, which you'll notice is not on this list. And so it's sort of, when as an older series fan, to sort of hear little bits of details come out, and you realize that you don't know any of these that the Dalek and the Doctor are talking about. There's that tantalizing mystery about this time war that we know nothing about, and that's what made it great.
Yeah.
So, your next choice on this list is one from David Tennant's first season, and it's a 2-part story, which was a very popular story, and one which is introduced a monster that has returned, but also another monster, which the actual main villain, which hasn't, and it's the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit.
I am the rage and the bile and the ferocity. I am the prince and the fall and the agony. I am the sin and the fear and the darkness.
Yes, I have never been more tense or almost frightened when watching a Doctor Who episode than the final 5 to 10 minutes of part 1, The Impossible Planet. I remember watching that. It was on a Saturday afternoon for me, and I just remember at the end of it, I realized that my legs were entirely tensed up because I was just gripped by this. It's never been more frightening, this episode, especially the part when Toby's sitting at his desk. That Toby, don't turn around. That, and that whole scene where he's playing up and all of a sudden he has writing all over his hands. I mean, it's just good, proper horror movie stuff. It's just I honestly think the episode itself has sort of been a little bit ignored and underrated compared to some of the more heavyweights in that year. But I think it's just one of the best.
Yeah, I mean, sort of the Ood, when they all speak as one, when they get possessed, it's a very creepy aspect. Especially their voice is quite creepy anyway. Even when they're because when they're being subservient, it's always a thing about, oh, they must be up to something. sort of going back to sort of Power of the Daleks, kind of when the Daleks were subservient. Even though the Ood are a new monster, you still think they must be up to something. But in fact, it turns out they aren't up to anything at all. They just get possessed by...
Yeah, but it's that creepy voice. It's kind of like the robots of death in a way, because the robots, they're
robots aren't evil.
Calm. No, they aren't. They're turned evil by whatever's control.
D84 is sort of good, actually. It's one of the Doctor's companions for that story. And they're sort of like that. Yeah. The Ood in a way.
They get turned.
And you've got the sort of close-knit cast of the base. It's sort of quite it seems like a realistic base, whereas, you know, in some stories you do get a sort of the place where you land, sort of you sort of don't get a feel of that this is sort of a real place, whereas you could sort of get that idea with the Croctor base.
It's a bit similar to Dalek in terms of the sort of the close-knit base.
Yeah, and the sort of
the enemy going around.
They're trapped because there's a black hole outside, obviously. So there's no way out.
Mm-hmm. And the only way out is in space. And there's that one scene where what's her name now? I can't remember the character's name. Miana Buring is the actress's name. Scooty, when she's sort of floating out in space, and that brilliant cello score. You know, it's as she sort of gets sucked into that black hole. That's one that everyone sort of quoted, but that's another great scene. It just isolated her in the middle of space. And then there's a great little conversation between Rose and the Doctor after they, you know, realize the TARDIS is probably gone forever, and they're just sort of talking about mundane things, what they'll have to do, you know. It's just little moments like that. The episode as a whole is stunning as well, but some of those little moments just really make it that much better.
Yeah, I mean, it is sort of the only real time in the series that we get to see the Doctor have to seriously consider what he would do if he was trapped in one time of space. Mm-hmm. In this story, because it does seem as though, from the character's point of view, as the TARDIS is lost. And it gives the Doctor an interesting edge that he might not have in other stories, because until sort of near the end of part 2, he still thinks the TARDIS is lost. So he doesn't have the sort of the escape route that he has in other stories.
So it's sort of like more of a final stand kind of thing, because he hasn't got much to lose, really.
Yeah. But I like how he has to, you know, he comes to terms with things like that during this episode. He comes to terms with what he needs to do now without the TARDIS. And then when he's sort of hovering in the pit there, you know, and him and Ida are talking about belief systems and everything, and then the great moment when he sort of, you know, before he cuts himself loose, you know, tell Rose, oh, she knows, and then drops it, you know, just the Doctor really goes through a lot in this story, but oddly enough, I think he probably goes through the easiest amount of it, because everyone else is tormented by Oods and demonic Toby for the whole episode.
That is a point. It does have an interesting aspect if you look at it in a religious way, with the devil literally being the villain. I mean, we've got a friend who is a reborn Christian, and he actually really enjoys this episode because he thinks it is a very faithful representation of the devil.
Because he is the villain, he's not like the hero or anything.
Yeah.
But I can imagine it being comfortable with some people.
Even with the name of itself. And this went out on around June 6, 2006, and everyone was sort of playing up the 666 thing. I think the remake of The Omen came out that weekend, as I remembered as well. And so there was that whole thing. I think it was timed to sort of be on that, and maybe the date cropped up first, and Russell T Davies realized that maybe that's what we would do. We'd do a devil episode around 666 or something like that. But it was a genuinely frightening episode. I mean, they pushed some boundaries there in terms of fear. I think probably in another episode of my list too. Not that I'm looking to move away from this one, but I seem to like the scary ones. I think the ones that are sort of more adult and tense. I think, and this is one of them.
So your next choice is one that was one of David Tennant's last stories, his penultimate story, and you see sort of a different side of the Doctor in this one. It's another one set on a base. Another one where he wears, in fact, he even wears the same spacesuit as he does in Puzzle Planet Satan Pit.
I hadn't noticed the theme, honestly, until you started mentioning it.
Surprised you didn't choose any of Troughton's base under siege. But it's the waters of Mars.
They all died. Do you know who that leaves? Me! It's taken me all these years to realise the laws of time are mine, and they will obey me!
Yes, I think that stands as, well, I mean, it's tough to rank stories. It's something I did as a younger person, needing the need to rank stories in order of my preference, and Impossible Planet Satan Pits stood the test of time, I think, for a long time, until maybe the Waters of Mars. And I think just it reminds me a little bit of the Impossible Planet, because it's those little moments that make it now much better. Actually, it's the direction in this, because Graham Harper is my favorite director of all time. And some of the way he shoots the scenes, the first transition from one of the base members to a water beast, so to speak, is done in out of focus long shot. The person's sort of talking on a communicator, and you can see the person sort of starting to spasm and jerk around, and then slowly rise up as a water beast. And the camera never focuses on what's happening, but the person in front of that person doesn't, and so that just makes it even more tense because you can feel what's coming. It's just a masterfully directed episode. And then that great conversation between I can't remember the base commander's name, played by Lindsay Duncan, and the Doctor. They're having that conversation where he finally lets her know that you're going to die. This is, I've come back to a time where the entire base dies, and I'm trying to save them all. And it's like about a 5-7 minute long conversation that happens across a communication screen, and it's just a devastating performance by Tennant. And at a time when I was starting to kind of grow tired of it, and the episode that follows is literally my least favorite Doctor Who story of all time, The End of Time. And I like to think that the Water of Mars just sort of goes to the end of time, and I don't have to deal with that nonsense with multiple masters and everything like that. So we can leave the David Tennant era on a high.
Yeah, it like the Impossible Planet, it really is, and Dalek really. It is an episode where the Doctor is pushed to his limit. And he's in a situation where he's trying to save everyone. But he's also in a situation where he feels he has nothing to lose. Yeah,
and with the sort of Time Lord Victorious thing, where saying I'll do what I want, I can do whatever I like with time and mess around whatever I want. He sort of becomes a bit like the Master in that, sort of, which is sort of probably a bit of foreshadowing for the Master's actual return in the subsequent story. Because sort of the Master doesn't really care about, changing time. Mm-hmm. He sort of has his sort of, and then he's made to realise that, that's not the Doctor that he's become.
Mm-hmm. He's become something else, and the way that that Lindsay Duncan's character deals with that, she commits suicide because she knows that she should have died, and that's the thing that that turns the Doctor around and makes him realize that he's gone too far. As to why he sees an Ood at that point, though, doesn't make sense. And unfortunately ties into the End of Time. Suddenly the Ood have become all powerful. I have no idea why.
Maybe the Ood was meant to be the Watcher, and maybe that Ood was meant to be Matt Smith. I don't know.
You raise a good point. That hasn't been properly explored. It
would make more sense than just the Ood managed to float around time.
Yeah, I like your idea. I kind of want to do a fan re-edit now of an Ood sort of coming to Matt Smith and just before he walks up the deck to the TARDIS to go regenerate into Peter Capaldi, he sort of talks to an Ood.
Sort of merges with it, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes him young again right before he regenerates. Oh, it all makes sense. All adds up.
Because this one hasn't got a regular companion. It was part of the special season, so the Doctor sort of feels it sort of seems like the Doctor's isolated. Because obviously he's got the team, but they're not the base team on the base, they're not as trusting as he would, because he hasn't got anyone sort of to come with him and sort of say, this is the doctor, he should be listened to.
Yeah, it kind of builds on the themes of Midnight, but it's not as extreme as all that. He still has to sort of talk his way out of it, which he does relatively quickly, I think, because the base gets under siege somewhat soon after he arrives. And of course, it's kind of classic Doctor Who in that regard. Lands on a base, gets accused of everything. Very Troughton-esque, I thought. I wonder if Phil Ford, who co-wrote it with RTD, was a Troughton fan when he was thinking up of this, or perhaps RTD was thinking of that. Who knows?
So, moving on from one where the Doctor's very soon about to regenerate, then your next choice is the one where he's just regenerated, and it's the 11th hour.
Who the man? I'm never saying that again. Fine.
Yeah, I cannot think of a more perfect way to introduce a new person to the series. It's just the perfect jumping on point. It's a perfect introduction for a Doctor. It's somewhat small, somewhat contained. It makes the Doctor the star and gives a deadline, so to speak, for him to sort of save the Earth. That's what I think Moffat does that really great. He does it in a couple of stories too, where he says, you have this amount of time to save the world, kind of thing, but doesn't make it as obvious as all that. It just sort of increases the intensity. And and this was huge back in 2010, because when David Tennant left and RTD left, like even the BBC admitted it after that, since then, through Stephen Moffat, that they were going to cancel the show. They thought, oh, this is it. We can't possibly top David Tennant's Doctor. And so and casting this young unknown actor as the new Doctor and changing everything. Stephen Moffat's now in the showrunners. No companions hanging over. It's almost an entirely different show. And to kick it off as confidently and as perfectly as all this, I remember, can I have an apple? His very first line, I was sold. I thought, this is it. This is amazing. I'm with this new Doctor from the get-go. I just think he's fantastic. And he's just superb through the whole episode. In a way, it was kind of, I grew to like David Tennant, but having him in, a hospital bed unconscious for more than half of the Christmas invasion was a bit of a smug way to introduce a new character, because he just sort of assumed that he was going to do everything great, and he was a little bit too heroic towards the end. But this one, he sort of he's having to run as he goes along. He doesn't even have time to change his clothes. He's just sort of he's born running, and he has to sort of solve everything on the go, and he does it magnificently.
This is a story which we've discussed on the podcast before, because it has been chosen before.
Very popular choice.
It seems to be a popular choice. The thing about this one is sort of the actual what people seem to like about it is not anything to do with the actual sort of plot with the Atraxi or Prisoner Zero. It is just Matt Smith's immediate introduction and being so amazing from the first episode, from the first scene even.
Yeah.
I know, it's the eyeball guys and the Prisoner Zero more or less just kind of like the Autons and Rose, or they're just sort of a villain to sort of have there, to be there to give the new Doctor something to do. But of course, it's brilliantly done in that way too, and that it sort of invents the crack and the mystery of Amy and everything. Like, it's so many seeds this episode that you don't really notice. And I think it's as much of a strong debut for Matt Smith as it is for Stephen Moffat, who you get the impression that he's sort of had this first album of his in mind for a long time, because that series 5 is just so tightly constructed, that there's no real throwaway moments there. Everything in there sort of seeds something else that happens later on, and there's a few of them in this episode that aren't glaring, but they just provoke a lot of curiosity.
See, because neither me or Will are big fans of Time of the Doctor, and sort of it can be sort of said that some of these sort of things with some of Moffat's plot seemed to be sort of made up as he went along, with the sort of all the silence and covariance sort of maybe weren't all set up from the 11th hour, like you claim.
Yeah, maybe that.
But if you look at the 11th hour as just a separate piece of television, it's sort of it works very well, sort of, because you don't know what the crack is. So now we do know what the cracks are. It might be a bit more difficult to watch it back, but I think it'd be, if you sort of separate it from the story arc, it works still good as still works well on its own.
It does. It really does. Yeah, it's a great little self-contained episode, and it's an hour long, and it doesn't. I find that some of the hour-long episodes are longer, like the Christmas specials. They almost feel like, there's a moment in there where it's sort of the momentum dies for about 5 or 10 minutes. It's almost kind of like a 6-part classic Who story in a way. And the 11th hour, it just keeps going. It's the paciest hour of Doctor Who I think they've ever made.
Yeah, I didn't realise until recently, when people were speculating about the length of Deep Breath, that the 11th hour was longer than a normal episode. Because I just was watching it and sort of didn't even consider, when I was watching it at the time, I've watched it back since, didn't even consider this might this get a bit of a longer one. This is going on a bit, because they just sort of got swept up in it.
Yeah, it moves very quickly. It does feel like a 45-minute episode, even though it's an hour long.
It's really well done, and credit to that goes to Adam Smith, who directed this, and the other story from this season that's on my list as well. He is brilliant. He's one of my favorite directors on Doctor Who, and this is it. He only did that first production block. He launched Matt Smith to the world and then walked away in triumph, which is a shame. But his direction sort of makes it pacey and
very good director.
Yeah, and it also slows it down when it needs to be, for the little scenes, like, the opening scene where he's spitting out the food and everything like that, and the fish sticks and custard is all like madcap and that sort of thing. But then it just drops right down, just him eating fish sticks with Amelia on the other side of the table. It's just this quiet conversation. I think he really melds those together really well. Yeah,
it's very effective, and it is pacey, but it doesn't make it everything too quick. There are moments when you can just sit and enjoy the scene, and you're not too worried about the episode just hurtling along and forgetting about the scene. It paces itself well.
It does, yeah.
Your next choice, as you said, is also from the first series with Matt Smith, and it's from the first production block.
Is this for the first one he filmed, actually? It is.
This
is the actual first story.
Actual first story. The Time of Angels / Flesh and Stone.
Amy Pond, Professor Riversong.
I'm going to be a professor someday, am I? How exciting! Spoilers!
Yeah, when The Impossible Planet and the Satan Bit came out, I think that was my favorite story of the new series, and I think this one has supplanted it. For many reasons, it was like the feelings I had with the 11th hour and The Impossible Planet combined. It was super tense, super, almost scary, supremely well directed. Super, as you said, Matt Smith's first days on set were shooting this, and he was doing all these great things, like where River Song is talking and he's sort of picking up a book and listening to it as he flips the pages and like wiggling around and stuff. He's just being very Tom Baker-esque without even knowing who real Tom Baker was, and this episode just really showed off that natural eccentricity to the Doctor, and that's the famous speech where he shoots the thing at the end, which I've never really understood what it is. I remember that cliffhanger did kind of baffle me, where he shoots the gravity globe and that makes everybody jump up to the ship somehow. But there's all sorts of little moments like that, and it's just a rollicking. It's a two-parter that just does not feel padded or stretched out or anything. It just rattles along with some breathtaking scenes in this that are far too numerous to mention. But one of them is when Ian Glenn's character, Octavian, is, about to be killed by a weeping angel, and they have that conversation there. There's just so many moments in this story. So many.
Yeah.
we've had this one chosen before. It was chosen in episode 5, and the person who chose it focused on the opening scene with River Song, and obviously this one is the one bringing back River Song after Silence in the Library, bringing her to a sort of a new audience, as it were, even though it's only been like a couple of years. And it also brings back the Weeping Angels. I mean, are you a fan of River Song's character?
I am, actually. I have always found that older women, so to speak, work well with the character of the Doctor, I find, and that goes throughout, Professor Amelia Rumford in The Stones of Blood, or even Todd from Kinda. I thought her and Peter Davison's Doctor, who was sort of a younger man as well, were a great team throughout Kinda, and I thought this, it works. It works well for Matt Smith's Doctor because he appears young. And in many ways, he is young and naive when it comes to relationships and everything. But of course, he's 1,300 years old, so he's a man of the universe as well. And so I think the supremely confident and experienced River Song is just a great foil for Matt Smith's Doctor. I don't think that a River Song opposite Peter Capaldi, for instance, I don't think that would work as well. But I think they've sort of closed that book, judging by the way she left in The Name of the Doctor. But I've always liked her. I know some people don't like her for some reason, but I've always had a soft spot for her.
Yeah.
The sort of at this point it was sort of the Doctor and the River Song were running backwards, which sort of something that did get lost, I think, during Series 6, which was a bit annoying because I did like how it was running in reverse, their timelines to each other, whereas it sort of became a bit more messed up and jumbled and complicated. Yeah. I did prefer River Song before all the arc stuff was involved, with her being like the Amy and Rory's child and everything. I thought she was better in this story. I liked her in this story a lot. And it obviously you got Weeping Angels as sort of another return in this one.
Yeah. Go on, sorry.
Some people sort of have questioned the wisdom of bringing back the Weeping Angels, but I always enjoyed the fact that they brought them back.
I think all 3 stories they've been in have been absolute knockouts. I hope they don't overdo them, but they have yet to. I think Angels Take Manhattan is a fantastic story as well, and narrowly avoided this list. Some people actually complain that we saw the angels move a little bit, but I don't mind that. Everyone had their eyes closed, so of course they would move, and it just made a creepy scene even creepier. But angels in the forest and everything, and that just sort of it was the setting, the different settings in the spaceship, the corridor, that went to black and then it cuts back up with that, just that circular corridor when they're coming through there. I mean, there's just memorable moments. If there's a chance to use the angels, it makes sense and doesn't diminish their effectiveness. And by golly, you use them, and they use them very well in this.
Yeah.
What I like about the Weeping Angels is they've never, when they've been brought back, they haven't just done Blink again. They've done something different. They've brought something new to them. They've not just tried to do Blink Part 2.
Yeah, they haven't tried to remake it.
They've thrown them into different situations, and that's it helps that Moffat has written all 3 episodes with the Angels. I don't know what another writer would do. Maybe Moffat's too caring of his baby, so to speak, and he won't let other people. But having the half-formed angels in that cavern there, and everyone, and especially when they realize that they've walked into basically a cavern of weeping angels, it was that great moment. That he just makes the most out of them. I wonder how many ideas he's had in his mind for these things since he wrote Blink, because he's come up with a lot of effective ones.
Your next choice is one of the later stories from Series 5, and it's a very different sort of story, because it sort of brings the Doctor into a mundane, everyday situation.
A more domestic situation.
A domestic situation. And it is the lodger.
Oh, I'm going to regret this. Okay, right, first, general background. You've got a target. Yes. 11th. Right, okay.
Yeah, that one has I enjoyed it the first time around, but every time I've watched it since then, I just realize how much I laugh and find Matt Smith hilarious and find his relationship with Craig hilarious as well. I mean, you could pair this one quite easily with Closing Time as well as sort of a two-parter. It's just so much fun. It is just so much fun to watch Matt Smith's doctor sort of try to behave in a domestic situation. You know, the way he spits out that wine, when he's sort of having, like what normal people would do, just sit on their couches drinking a glass of wine. He spits it out like an 8-year-old. And he tries to be an office boy there, he's just sort of like on the phone. Oh, excuse me, I'm eating a biscuit, that sort of thing. Like he's trying to get a grasp of how humans function in a day-to-day world. It doesn't quite get it. It's just so charming and lovely and fun.
It's a very different type of story to the other ones you've chosen, because perhaps it leans itself more to comedy than some of your other choices, like The Waters of Mars, Dalek, and The Impossible Planet. Much more dramatic stories in the sense that they can be quite frightening. Would you say that maybe that's the reason that you chose this one, maybe to lighten out the darkness?
Not consciously, no. I honestly I've always just loved the story. I mean, I'm pleased to say that I could like stories for more than different reasons. I do like the tense episodes, but sometimes when they overtly try for comedy, like Unicorn and the Wasp, it doesn't quite come off as well because I think they're trying a little too hard. This just seems natural. It might be because David Tennant's a very straight-laced doctor that for him to sort of dip into comedy mode a little bit doesn't quite make sense. But Matt Smith's doctor, you can believe it. You can believe those situations that he's in, and so the humor seems a lot more natural. Because of that, and I think that's why I like it. But I like things that are sort of realistic in a way, and the way that humans react to things, I think is probably a common theme with the tense episodes that I like and the humorous ones.
This episode also introduced the weird silent spaceship thing that we sort of never really understood why was there. Do you think that the bad guy or the villain,
the bad spaceship,
the bad spaceship of the episode is as important as, say, the Dalek in Dalek and the Weeping Angels in The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone? Would you say that maybe plot in terms of the villain doesn't always matter when if the episode's enjoyable or not? I
don't think. I mean, you don't necessarily. It is just a spaceship basically doing its random function. That's kind of it's a great thing. It makes it better, I think. If they try to sort of cram in a villain who is like trying to get back to his home planet so he can destroy another one or something like that, I mean, that would sort of diminish his effectiveness. But since it's just sort of a spaceship that's on autopilot, I think it makes it better, actually. I like that.
Do you like the character of Craig Owens?
Do I like him? Oh, absolutely. You mean, I do. Because he just seems quite helpless and hapless, and he, I think I enjoyed watching the Doctor Who Confidential at the time too, seeing how much Matt Smith and James Corden enjoyed each other's company, and we're just having a blast doing these things especially Closing Time, when they're doing these weird little fan films at 3 a.m. while waiting for their shots to come up, and when they're shooting in a shopping mall. But So I do like him because he is very much the everyman who doesn't quite understand what's going on. And he's equally as clueless at some things as the Doctor is in others. And so together they form a bit of a team. But separately, they don't really know what's going on, which makes they're a great comedy duo. I like them a lot.
Yeah, they're sort of filling each other's gaps, don't they? Sort of, the Doctor's good at sort of alien, sort of sciencey sort of stuff, whereas Craig knows how to function in modern life.
Yeah, except he doesn't know. The great thing is that he's trying to sort of, wonder how to get together with Sophie. And the Doctor is also trying to sort of, help him as well, but both are equally clueless about girls as the other one. So that makes it even more funny when they, they just says, "Oh, just kiss the girl" at the very end. It's just, it just gets it down to the brass tacks, which is funny.
Your next choice is it's one of the last stories, season 6, and it's more focused on the companion. Or companions in this story than it is the Doctor. And it's the girl who waited.
The controls are stuck. They've locked them from the outside.
Can you unlock them?
Yeah, give me a minute and your cutest smile. That's the one.
Can you stop flirting with me?
And it is, if you were to look at Doctor Who when it came back in 2005 with its, marauding armies of Daleks attacking London and everything like that, and think that an episode that has 4 characters, 2 of them the same, and have it not only sustain a 45-minute episode of Doctor Who, but just become riveting television to watch. I wouldn't believe you in a second. And I think the story is just fantastic in The Girl Who Waited, but the fact that the limitations that they've placed on themselves to tell a good story. This was the Dr. Light episode of that season. You don't notice it because it's the Doctor has a very prominent part in it. He's just in the TARDIS sort of talking Rory through things. But it is just amazing to see what can be done with just a tiny amount of characters and just brilliant direction from Nick Curran. I think this was his first or second. I want to say he did another one before or after this. I can't remember. It might have been the God Complex. And just some of the final scene where Rory is talking to old Amy on the other side of the TARDIS wall, and they sort of dissolve the 2 shots together where it just holds in that for 20 seconds. There's a lot of great little lyrical shots like that just just make it so beautiful to watch. It's just a gorgeous episode and one that sort of makes Rory go through some choices that he's never really had to make before too.
It's also a very emotional episode, as you said in your summary. Mm-hmm. Do you think that it is a great example of how time travel can be used to create emotional and moral dilemmas?
Oh, definitely. It's one that is kind of, it would have been interesting if Amy actually joined the TARDIS as a 44-year-old woman. But that was a different Amy now. She'd been on her own for 20 odd years. And it's a great, because often we see we've traveled to another planet, like an end of the world or something like that. It says, okay, we are at the end of the Earth and it's an entirely different place, but that's just a planet, that's just a thing off in the distance. But to actually see a character age in that time and have that person change with circumstances and everything, it was good for the series to sort of finally look at that, because it's an important thing. It happens all the time in the Doctor's life. He leaves companions one place and he can come back 20 years later and they can be old again. Like Sarah Jane Smith in School Reunion. And so, but this of course happens because of, the Doctor's hand in a way, it's a bit of a mistake, and how the Doctor knows that they can't coexist. So he locks the old Amy out, which is a bit of a tragic scene as well, and forces Rory to sort of make a choice. It deals with some really good issues, and it makes for an entertaining episode too.
So this one, it's sort of, there's even the sets are quite limited. There's sort of a lot of white, sort of, when you think it's sort of a lot of white sort of backgrounds and stuff. But it's
bit like the Mind Mob.
yeah, but it's sort of a bit it sort of rises beyond that. It's not. It's something that they could have done in the classic series. It's not like something which sort of is relying on all the CGI.
Yeah, oddly, the sets reminded me of the Ark in Space somewhat, because they were the first episode of that was, you know, the main cast, only the main cast, wandering around a white colored spaceship, so to speak, and that was effective too. That first episode of Ark in Space. It's amazing what you can do, you know, with so little. I think RTD tried it with Midnight by setting the entire thing in one room on a little space shuttle, but thinking he would save money. But in the end, it cost a lot of money because he had to pay all the actors to be there on all the shooting days. So that cost money in itself. But this, you know, simple white sets, 3 cast members. This is the epitome of how you make Doctor Who on a shoestring budget. And it was a lower budget episode. They had to sort of cut some corners on some other ones. And you didn't notice, you know, because of the strength of the story and the strength of the direction and the strength of the acting, you just did not notice that there was a cheap episode.
Yeah, and that was sort of the whole thing behind this one, was trying to sort of make a cheap episode without it looking cheap, which is obviously a worry when you have to if you have to cut costs. You know, it might look like, oh, that's the cheap one. I can see that one. It's obviously the cheap one. Whereas this one sort of covers it up very well.
It really does. Yeah, it's always, and I'm glad to see it get so much point.
Sort of the script sort of is the focus really, and the acting rather than any of the effects.
Yeah, as it should be. I think, you know, there's been a few episodes like The Big Bang, for instance, which is the finale for series 5, and you think it's a big giant finale. And really, there's only 4 people in that. There's a doctor, 5 with Amelia. You know, there are so few characters in some of Stephen Moffat's stories that I just find it so effective, because you focus on all of them a lot more, and they each get their own amount of attention. Where sometimes I think in the RTD era that he surrounded his main characters with massive casts, just to sort of take the focus off the main core, which is a bit of a shame.
It's a lot different to the End of Time, where you got the Doctor, Will, Funvochi, 7 billion masters.
Exactly, you know, and eventually he had to sort of like Russell T Davies sort of said, I didn't know what to do with the millionaire and his daughter, so he just had to say, okay, they're done. I had to write them out pretty much at the beginning of part 2 because they had nothing left to do. Here, you know, in stories like this, there's something for everyone to do because there's hardly any characters in the story.
Exactly. So your final choice is one which is definitely a very popular one. In fact, it won the Doctor Who magazine 50th anniversary poll, and it is The Day of the Doctor.
Whatever you've got planned, forget it. I'm the Doctor. I'm 904 years old. I'm from the planet Gallifrey and the constellation of Castorberus. I am the oncoming storm, the bringer of darkness, and you are basically just a rabbit, aren't you?
It almost seems a bit of a cliche. I submitted this list before that poll came out, and I was somewhat surprised and somewhat not surprised when it topped the poll, because I just didn't think enough time had passed to sort of elevate it to that status. But would you consider, you know, how much pressure Moffat might have put on himself to make the 50th anniversary story that, you know, it had to be nigh on perfect for everyone to be entertained and enthralled and enjoy it. And somehow he managed to do that, because I haven't heard anyone say a bad word about this story. You know, after that much build-up, you just expect a letdown. And from anyone who's seen it on, you know, on their laptop for the first time, watching it on TV, or any of the people who went to the theater screenings, everyone just seemed to just love this story. And it is just a perfectly crafted piece of television that sort of acknowledges the past, celebrate it a little bit, create a new mythology, but weave a very entertaining story into it and give a reason, so to speak, to have, you know, doctors meet up with each other. It's not crammed in and everyone sort of gets their own time in the sun. It's just brilliant. And again, directed by Nick Curran, who I think is probably the best director they could have got for this, because he sort of makes those longer, quieter moments really cinematic. And in a 76-minute episode, there's a couple moments where they're sort of just talking and everything, and it's great to watch. That was great to watch in the theater too. I don't know where you guys saw it, but I saw it both times, on the 23rd and the 25th of November, and it was excellent both times.
I saw it at the time broadcast at my home. I didn't go to the cinema to see it, but I thought it was thoroughly enjoyable, and it sort of fitted the length very well, because it didn't it fit everything in without stretching it out, or it could have tried to fit too much in, but it didn't try and fit too much in either. So the 75-minute slots was about right, because some people were like, oh, it should have been 90 minutes. But, I mean, if they had made it 90 minutes, they could have, I'm sure they could have found stuff to drag it out a bit, but they would have sort of lessened it. It would have made it seem a bit padded. Because it just fitted perfectly into that time slot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a perfect length, wasn't it? Everything just seemed to happen when it should have, and there didn't seem to be any moments where just sort of, okay, let's get on to things here, because even the nice little quiet moments that happened in between the action were good. With John Hertzstocker talking to Clara, that could have been a dragging scene, but it was really great. And having the three of them sort of decide what to do with the big red button on the box, that's what I also love. I love the fact that Moffat lovingly laughed at a lot of the various conventions of Doctor Who in the past, with what are you going to do, assemble a cabinet with it, when he's talking about the song Screwdriver, and he says, I like how he says quietly, if only there was just a big red button. And sure enough, there is a big red button to deploy the whatever the bomb is. I can't remember the name of it. Little things like that. He sees the jokes before you have a chance to laugh at them, and so you can laugh at them later on and not feel like you're sort of cutting down the show. It's just a brilliantly crafted thing. I love that story so much.
Yeah.
And obviously the moment is played by Billie Piper, obviously, as who would have played Rose, and sort of that it could be sort of seen as something like he's just trying to fit in Billie Piper. It seems as a classic companion. Sort of everyone seems to like Billie Piper's, apart from me. But Rose is very popular, especially amongst some of the younger fans who sort of started with Tennant, whereas he didn't do. It was sort of, she did work as the moment, because you could tell she was playing a different character. She didn't try and make it just exactly like Rose. No, and that was the great tease too. They said Billie Piper's back, but not as Rose, which is great, because otherwise it would just become a Tennant Rose show, and it was a time for all the doctors, and as Matt Smith was the current one. He didn't necessarily want, you already have sort of Clara shoved to the side to some point already. So to have Tennant and Rose there, I think would have been uncomfortable. So I like that. I also like that really they only had one brief camera shot together too. When he's standing there and Rose, who they can't see, is actually in the background, and it's not her. How that must have infuriated certain sectors of the fandom. Yeah. Especially doesn't he say bad wolf girl, and he bad wolf? He gets you see him. Yeah. Recognize it, but.
He sort of triggers, but then they move on because
you have to move the story on. You can't dwell on it.
Yeah, and then seeing this in the theater was quite an experience. I mean, I grew up as a lonely Doctor Who fan. I didn't know anyone until I met Warren, and then we started the podcast 15, 20 years after I'd started watching the show. So to watch Doctor Who in a theater full of people was quite an experience as well, and the moments that stand out for me are the Capaldi eyes. What a debut for a Doctor! Just have a half-second shot of his eyes, and everyone just whooped with that. And then when Tom Baker comes on, I mean, it's that was a nigh-on religious experience for I think a lot of of classic Doctor Who fans. I really think you're right. You heard that voice, and even then you didn't believe it. It cannot be Tom Baker, really. And then it was, and he's just delightfully batty as always. And it was, a perfect capper to a great story.
And seeing as the Day of the Doctor is a celebration of Doctor Who, it would be fitting to move on to your book, which is
yes.
Doctor Who, a celebration.
That it is. I have it in front of me. I still have it. I bought it, I think, in the mid-'80s somewhere. It's a bit dog-eared, but it was written by a guy called Peter Haining, who wrote some of these sort of larger non-fiction books in the mid-'80s. And this one came out to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Doctor Who. And this was my go-to book for many, many years. It had, at the end of it had an episode guide. So all these stories that I never really even seen or heard of before were suddenly, they're sort of there in front of me, and I could see all of the history of Doctor Who up to that point in one book. It was just a great Rosetta Stone moment for me as a young Doctor Who fan. The days before the internet, kids, we had to sort of rely on things like this to discover stuff. And oddly enough, I don't think it even mentioned the missing episodes that much. So I looked at that episode guide at the end of the book, and dreamed of seeing all of them one day. And of course, later had my dream shattered when I realized that some of them do not exist anymore. But I've had that book forever, and I will never get rid of it. It's been a special book for me.
I suppose it feels the same sort of role in your fandom as The Monsters and Villains by Justin Richards did for me, because that was the first time I really saw anything of classic Doctor Who. The first episode I saw was the 5 Doctors of classic, but the first time I sort of knew anything about things like the Cybermen, and I think the Cybermen were in it. They might not have been.
Yeah, I think the Cybermen were in it.
But like all the old monsters, and that there were some stories which I thought, that person, that story, that monster, that villain looks very good, and then I'd like to see that at some point, and then found out that. When I found out with the missing episodes that doesn't exist, so I can't. And also that find out some of them that looks good from the little description that aren't as good when you actually see them.
It's a rite of passage, isn't it, for a Doctor Who fan? That's the sort of the step you have to take, no matter what age you are or how old of a fan you are. You sort of have to go through that moment of discovery that what you were looking forward to might not be as good as you want, or it might not exist in the first place.
Yeah.
A good life lesson there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Doctor Who teaches people disappointment and coping with it. It's excellent.
Now, your other choice is, it's a sonic screwdriver. There's not much you can say about it. They've released, I think there's been many iterations of sonic screwdriver that have been released by different companies and all sorts. What's your favourite?
Well, I have two. I've got the that's the David Tennant one there. I remember the Chris Eccleston one, actually. I think I bought one when it first came out, and then I have the Matt Smith one that makes different noises. I like the Matt Smith one because I think in the RTD era, I think he used it a lot. The sonic screwdriver a lot more, whereas I think Matt Smith uses it more as like a tricorder in Star Trek. It just sort of like
waves it around,
scans around, and and then sort of whips it out and looks at the readings. And I like that idea. I like how he uses it. A lot of people say they use it a lot, but when you sort of focus on some of the stories that he uses it in, he's more using it that way than he is blowing up a bomb or something like that.
Yeah, it's only really ones like the Power of 3, which sort of solves it all with the sonic screwdriver.
Yeah, but really, that's a rare moment when you think about it, that he actually saves the day with a sonic screwdriver. But and really, how can you? I can't imagine. Sometimes, oddly, in my apartment building, the door opens. The elevator door opens on its own. Sometimes I walk in the door, and all of a sudden, the door just magically opens. I'm not too sure why that is doing that. There's no one pressing the buttons. It's sort of sense that the front door of the building is open, and sometime I want to have my sonic screwdriver at the ready and hopefully someone with me to impress. And walk through that front door and then immediately do that to the elevator and have it open. And I am prepared for that day to happen, so I always have the Sonic with me.
Yeah, I've got the Matt Smith one as well. I did have the David Tennant one, but I think it broke, so I think it's been thrown away since then. I did see one
overuse, just like in the era itself.
Yeah. Well, it's the original prop, wasn't it? And Christopher Eccleston was too thin and flimsy. That's why the David Tennant's Doctor had a slightly thicker prop based more on the actual toy they released.
Yeah, I found that awesome. I feel like I'm holding a bit of canon here.
Yeah. I did see one in Boots the other day. Which is a shop that I have in Britain. I don't know if it's got any outlets in foreign places, but it's
no, I haven't heard of Boots, but
no, it's sort of a how would you describe it?
Chemists.
Yeah, chemist sort of place. But they do like toys. There was like they had a David Tennant one and a Paul McGowan one. It sort of shows how even you can get in a chemist now. It's got a big branch of it, so it's not like a little corner shop, but still that you can get like a Paul McGowan era sonic screwdriver with sounds. Which is how big Doc 2 is, really.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it?
Oh, in this part of the world too. I mean, you walk into any novelty store or HMV even, they have just a huge selection of Doctor Who stuff here. And like I said before, I grew up as a lonely Doctor Who fan, having to seek out everything regarding the show. And now that it's sort of presented in front of me wherever I am, it's a weird thing to see Doctor Who so mainstream in this part of the world.
Well, I think we're coming to the end of the podcast now.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on.
Yes, thank you very much.
If the listeners want to check out Radio Free Skaro, if they haven't already, which they should have done, but if they haven't already, then how would they do that?
You can visit radiofreescaro.com or follow us on Twitter at Radio Free Skaro. Us, along with everyone else, are eagerly awaiting the premiere of Series 8, so we're really looking forward to not only watching it but talking about it on the podcast.
Yeah, unless you've already read the scripts, in which case you're very naughty and you should not share any spoilers with anyone.
Exactly.
So we'll be back soon with some more episodes. So while you wait, you can follow at Desert Island 2 on Twitter. Go on our website desertisland2.wordpress.com or look us up on Facebook. So thanks you everyone for listening, and we will see you. Well, you will hear us next episode. Goodbye.
Bye.